everyone, and welcome to 1 hour of Hacking HR, kickstarting this last week of October and our last conversations in this monthly series. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour. We have Jessa working her magic backstage, and it's so wonderful to see that we already have people dropping comments from literally all over the world. It's always a joy and privilege to see where you're taking the time and the curiosity from to listen to us and watch our lives. We do have an amazing lineup of speakers, and they will be talking about integrating the soft into strategy. Basically, we will be discussing about ways to align culture and people strategy with the business objectives for success. Now, Jessa, please do help me bringing up the wonderful people on the screen. And while they pop up, I will just continue to welcome everybody and warmly encourage you to use the comments, use the chat as your own private conversation space. I am sure I am not the only one who will keep an eye on the chats, and we are always happy to bring in some of your highlights into our conversation in the panel. Now, there is one thing that we learned through all these conversations, that irrespective of the topic, there are always amazing nuances across geographies, generations, workplace environments. So do let us know how you experience this integration of the soft into the strategy. So I see that technology might not be our best friend today, but let's go agile, not fragile, and make the most out of our time today. The first round is simple. You already know the drill. I will pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen, or at least as I can see you on my screen. I see that Jessica is trying to fix her camera issue. Firstly, please kindly shortly introduce yourselves and do let us know what is the perspective that you bring into our conversation today. Khalil, it's so great to see you. Welcome.
Welcome, great to see you. Thanks to the panelists. Thanks to the people joining from all parts of the world. Excited to be on this panel. My full name is Khalil Zafar. I'm a management consultant specializing in the future of work. I am author of the book Future of Work Simplified. And I think my perspective could be in technology and people perspective, aligning
Khalil,
work
your
according to
connection, Khalil, your connection is acting up. Let's just move to Trent, and maybe if it stabilizes, we will come back and pick that up. So Trent, welcome. Good to see you.
Good to see you again. Trent Cotton. I am the Vice President of Talent and Culture for Hatchworks Technologies, based in Atlanta, but we've got employees all throughout the U.S. and throughout Latin America. And I've been in HR for 20 years, but I got into HR from kind of the business side, because I was always taught if you don't like something, go in and break it and fix it. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 20 years.
Thank you so very much, Trent. Good to have you. Wayne, welcome.
Glad to be here, and I always enjoy interacting with the panel and the people in the Hacking HR. It's a great organization. My name is Wayne Tarkin. My primary focus is I teach at University of Pennsylvania, organizational dynamics, and the intersection of agile. I believe that we've taken the agile ways of working, kind of stripped out the technical requirements, adapted some leadership practices to make it something that anybody can use. And so that's really our primary focus. We consult with people throughout the world, and I'm looking forward to showing how the agile ways of working with the culture can align with people strategies to make better business outcomes.
Thank you so very much. And I am so happy. I see that in the meantime, the names popped up on our screen. So please also do feel free to reach out to our panelists and engage. Tonio, good to have you on the panel. Welcome.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. Just a quick background on me. I am the founder of a company called EXT. It's Experience and Transformation. And as you can imagine, that is all things change, transformation, employee experience, culture, and all these wonderful things that we're going to talk about today. So I'm very excited to join you.
Wonderful. Jessica, so good to see you. Happy the camera issue got resolved.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, technology. But hello, good to see you again. Happy to be here. My name is Jessica Siegel. I am also in Atlanta, and Trent and I figured out his office is a block from my home. So never been on one of these with someone from Atlanta, let alone a neighbor. So glad to be on here with you, Trent. So I, my entire career, have worked in small to mid-sized businesses where aligning the people strategy to the business objectives has always been a huge priority, because you have to prove every dollar you're spending, every penny you're spending, and show that what you're doing for the business and optimizing the people to optimize the KPIs for the business really is top priority, and really what needs to be happening across the board. So recently launched my own firm, Flyaway Consulting, working with a couple of great clients right now, helping to bring L&D in-house and building out from there.
Thank you. And Khalil, let's give your connection one more try and see if now we can hear you properly.
Okay, if my connection breaks, once again, thanks to technology. So my full name is Khalil Zafar, and I'm a future of work expert, management consultant. And I think my role in this panel would be to bring in the perspective from the geographical side, because I work a lot in the Middle East and South Asia. So my perspective on the culture and the strategy is going to bring in a new side to it.
Wonderful. And we definitely heard you way better now. So I keep saying that I won't be impressed by technology until I can download ice cream. So today is one of those days. Now, when I saw the title of the panel, what really drew my attention were the quotation marks around soft when we speak about integrating the soft into strategy. And I will ask you, before we jump way deep into the topic, how do you feel about those quotations mark around soft? And Wayne, I will ask you to be the pioneer on this one. I always go diagonally. I have no idea why, but Wayne, please.
No problem. Well, it's funny, if you mentioned soft several years ago, people would kind of roll their eyes and say, you're not really a business person. But fortunately, things have evolved nowadays, and soft, people's side of the equation is much more important. And you see that, I think it's primarily driven by a younger generation coming into the workplace who expect companies to, have the same values, promote the same ideas. And so you see a lot of companies more than ever before kind of getting into the political arena, talking about things that they value, that they stand for. You heard Disney in the States and others have done that. So I think it's a good thing. I think we're all people and all human. And the more we can address the human side of the business, I think the better off we're going to be.
Thank you. Unmuting competition is officially open. So please jump in and take it away. Tonio.
Yeah, whenever someone says that to me, that's soft skills, I say, well, if they're so soft, then why are they so hard for people to practice and put in place, right? No one does it perfectly. And if it was easy, then they would. And because it's not, they don't. So I don't think they are soft, actually.
Wonderful. Jessica. Khalil, please go.
Okay, I think we always say soft and the hard side of the strategy, but I think the word usage is a bit more complex than just writing it down as soft. The HR experts always say the fifth industrial revolution is going to be the collaboration between the humans and the machines. So the automations, the artificial intelligence, and how you're going to come up with processes and policies that align to the human side. So I think the business is being run by the people. The business is run by the processes which are designed by the people, and the business, the products and the services are for the people. It's extremely important to understand the soft side, the elements like related to human psychology, the soft skills and everything. So I think rather than just going too much for the people listening out there, not getting too much into the technological and advanced jargons, but just trying to be, very clear forward that soft side is an extremely important thing, not only for the business, but also for the product and the services as well.
Yeah, so when I saw the soft in quotes, I was laughing because I think in so many businesses, we understand, right, whatever measurement you use, your KPIs, your OKRs, we understand those are our hard line in the sand and our metrics that we're striving for. But then there's also the soft side of those metrics of, do you have your people strategy in place, or what other processes and procedures need to happen internally to make those KPIs and OKRs, come to light. So I think there's so much on the soft side of our business strategies that we don't always think about. But if you're missing those key components, you're never going to hit those targets. And for me, that's really how I interpreted it. Like, I'm talking with a potential client right now who keeps saying, I need business development. And then the scope of work that I'm putting together is just growing and growing and growing, because all of the things that she needs to have in place to develop her business are those fundamental building blocks aren't where they need to be. So her business is never going to grow in the state that it's in. So I think a lot of companies fall into that category if we're so focused on the wins and getting those dollars and then the metrics up. But what are the soft pieces we need to address first?
Trent, you're in the hot seat of going last for this one.
Yeah, I think I'm struggling because I don't see them as soft skills. I see them as being necessary skills. Whenever someone asks me what I do, I tell them that I'm in charge of the largest asset or revenue producing asset and the largest expense in the company. And in order to hit those KPIs, hit the revenue target, manage the risk, yeah, there's some technical skills, but I would probably say 70 to 80% of that is more driven by the internal workings of someone. I'm working on my next book, the High Performing Recruiting Team. So I'm spending a ton of time just in the psychology of what makes a high performing team. And none of it is technical skills. All of it is just this intrinsic drive and these competencies, these behaviors, these mindsets that they have. So I guess that's why I kind of remain quiet and let my other panelists speak, because I'm probably far to the right of where the conversation is. Not surprising.
Thank you so very much. It's great to have such diversity on a panel. And before we see the usual questions popping up on the chat, I do want to make sure that I tell everybody that this conversation is recorded. So I will remind you of that several times across our conversation. And I was thinking back to our Becoming a Strategic HRBP Summit of last week. And no matter how we looked at the topic, one thing came out over and over and over again, crystal clear, that there is no such thing as people strategy separated from the business strategy. So my next question to you all is, one, how do you feel about that statement? And second, how do we actually align the people dimension to the business, what people would probably call hard strategy? Tonio, I see you nodding thoughtfully, so you drew my eyes. Could you please lead us into this?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it is I think about it as operationalizing the business strategy through the people. So I think about that would include things like, of course, the talent strategy, but mainly it's the focus in my world is on the employee experience and the culture and the organizational systems that deliver the business strategy. So when I say that, operationalizing it, the way I think about that is I really focus on the culture for the most part. And there's other aspects that I just named. But when I think about it, I'm typically reverse engineering the culture, the behaviors, the experiences I want people to have in the organization so that they can deliver on the vision, mission, values, purpose, business strategy, right? So there's a lot of things that go into it. We can obviously dive in later if you'd like in more detail, but that's really how I think of it. So again, instead of, as you mentioned, instead of the people part being a Band-Aid or some one-off thing or some program or a foosball table, it's actually driving. It's actually the input into the business strategy. And then the effect is, the results, the customer experience, the revenue, all those great metrics that we're chasing.
Wayne, I see you unmuted.
Oh, I am unmuted. Yeah, so, I would agree that the culture and people, they go together in business results. my focus typically is on how we communicate things, right? I think someone said all transformation is linguistic. The language we use and the things that we talk about really drive change. And so when I work with my students or my clients, it's always about the conversations. Companies move in the direction of the conversations, and so it's how can we have the conversations that align our working and our business to the business results with our customers. So for me, integrating people and culture is really about promoting the right kinds of conversations, creating a safe environment where people feel free to talk, where mistakes are learned from versus disciplined, rapid learning kinds of things.
I would like to add one thing. I think it's important to know when we talk about the culture of an organization. So it is my personal understanding and views that most of the researches and the information, the theories that we have right now comes from the Western world. When I say West, it's from the US, the UK, the Australia. So if we try to replicate those theories, those models, drive for strategy and culture, and try to implement them, at anywhere in Africa or in Asia or in Middle East, it's not going to work. So I think before understanding the details, one, if you are a leader or an HR person working in an organization, you need to understand what your overall culture is, because I am a firm believer that whatever the culture of the geographic region is, of the society is, people bring that same culture to the organization at work. So let's suppose the role of women at workplace would be perceived as totally different in the US as compared to somewhat in Pakistan or in India or in Bahrain or in Kuwait. So first you need to understand what the overall norms and the cultures are, understand the business values and ethics over there, and then try to adjust, what we call, always say, the best management practices. So the best management practice might work in Australia or in Canada, but it's not a necessity that it will work in Africa or in Australia always. So culture need to be clear. What your culture is, how it needs to be communicated, is going to be different in different parts of the world. When rightly pointed it out, you need to communicate it, but once again understand the art of communicating it within your culture as well. It's going to be the most important thing for any organizational culture or any leader. That's my take on this start.
That's such a good point. I just want to throw one thing in there because I had a global role a while back and I had to kind of work through this exact same thing that you're talking about, because we had folks all over the world. And part of my job was rolling out the culture and the purpose and the values and all that good stuff. And what we found was it was helpful to take what we called a globalization approach. So we had certain global kind of values and mindsets of the organization that came from the strategy. But then to your point, we let each geography or each location kind of tailor it to their local, to your point, culture or norms and ways of working. And we found that to be really helpful.
Yeah, and culture, it's such a duplicitous word because, like you mentioned, Khalil, it can mean society, culture, and then I think, businesses have just adapted it for work. And so, again, not trying to split hairs, but just for me, I like to mean what I say. And so I talk more about what's our corporate DNA, because all of us have DNA that's very similar. The culture is different. How we think and how we execute it is different, but that core DNA is pretty much the same. And so, if I'm looking at a team, for me, understanding what that organizational DNA is, I can sit on a couple of one-on-ones and I can sit on a couple of department meetings and just about with 80 to 90% accuracy, give you a summation of what the real DNA of that organization is, because that's where moving that needle actually happens. And that's also, at least for the clients and managers that I consult, that's usually one of the first ones that they overlook. They don't treat their one-on-one time as being sacred. They don't treat their department meetings as being, hey, how can we talk about the values and how our values relate to the topics that we're doing? They just, kind of get in there, number. So I think that, if you want to start a grassroots, you need to actually do grassroots, and it starts in that one-on-one, and that next level of impact is departmental meetings.
Oh, wow, to follow up all of that, I totally appreciate Khalil having the global perspective and redefining culture in that way, because having worked in global organizations, that's a huge factor. In anything with trainings, with meetings, policy rollouts, it's really important to keep all of that in mind. What I was thinking about with this question was when we're talking about aligning our people strategy to the business strategy. I've worked in way too many organizations that aren't clear of what their business strategy is. So therefore, I don't know how to align the people strategy to that. So I had one company I was working with came to me and said, oh, we need to do new manager training because we're going to be hiring a lot. They said, well, are you hiring managers from the outside, or are we promoting people internally? What's our value proposition with talent? Are we looking to buy it, or are we looking to build it right now? Right? Am I spending more time building a best-in-class onboarding program, or are we spending more time growing the farm team from within? And I was met with crickets and blank stares. And I was like, those are two very different initiatives, right? Onboarding new people versus building the farm team from within. And we need to have clarity for what we want the talent strategy to be so we can support those business objectives. But as a team of one, I can't do both and do them really well right now. So let's pick a lane and double down on that. And I'll build out the other piece on the side while I can. But I need guidance of what we're aiming for right now. And I got a lot of blank stares. And then over the following weeks, was finally able to have productive conversations. And we ended up building the farm team from within. That was the first priority, which was fine. But you have to have clarity as a business. You need your C-suite, you need your executive leadership to have clarity. So when you're asking those questions, right, the people around that table with me should have had an answer the minute I asked that question, but they were deer in headlights and had no idea what to do. I see Wayne unmuted, so I'm curious what Wayne has to say.
No, I agree with everything you're saying. It's funny, when I work with the senior leadership team, I always ask this question: can anybody recite the mission statement? And more often than not, people can't. And so, they probably spent millions of dollars and many consultants doing that, but they can't even focus on that. You can conversely, within a company like Johnson & Johnson has a credo, right? And they live the credo. And so that's a little different. It's been around 100 years, and that really helps kind of focus people on maybe not a mission statement or business objectives, but a culture, a way of doing business, right? Which helps. Just one story: we work with an huge international company based in Japan, and they had multiple locations. And this was when remote work was coming into fore, and we were trying to manage that. And different cultures don't encourage that, and some do. And it became a challenge because you couldn't even come up with a standard policy among 5 continents. And so I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think focusing on a credo, getting people to believe in the same values, I think goes a long way towards promoting the kind of culture you want.
I would really like to take this conversation just a little bit deeper, and also acknowledging quite a lot of energy in the comments around how can leaders, walk the talk. And this is an amazing conversation, but what does it look like in real life from the perspective of leaders' behaviors? So whether they can recite the mission statement, or maybe they can, but they don't live in it and live up to it, or they cannot, but they definitely display the kind of leadership that supports and nurtures the culture that we strive for. How does a leadership set of behaviors look like in the companies that do align the soft with the hard, with no quotation marks this time?
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I have some real experience with this, and I think that it's just like any culture, any change, anything you want to drive in the organization, a lot of the same behaviors and levers that you're going to pull will be similar, right? So for example, if you want to create, like Microsoft did, if you want to move your culture to operationalize the business strategy to be more innovative, what they did, as I'm sure you're all familiar with when Satya Nadella took over, but they moved from that culture, which was really a culture of know-it-alls to learn-it-alls. And so they really started implementing a lot of different agile ways of thinking and different practices that really started to incorporate psychological safety, being comfortable experimenting and quote failing and iterating as you go. And so a lot of that for leaders, what the leaders had to do was managers would have to become coaches instead of just telling people what to do and having all the answers. It was much more of a collaborative relationship. The senior leaders would need to be walking the talk. Obviously, Satya Nadella was the king of that. He was doing that. So really setting that environment, maybe sharing stories, rewarding people for quote failing, and then sharing the story with the organization of, yep, so-and-so tried this experiment. It didn't work, but guess what? We learned these 4 things or something like that. So there's some real practical things you can do, but from a leader's perspective, they've got to be incenting the right behaviors that they want to see in the culture, right? So that innovation piece, they have to disincent the things they don't want to see. And you can also build that into the different systems in the organization, like the way people are measured and all those types of things. So I'll pause there, but that's just a little bit of what came up for me.
Wonderful.
I think brilliantly explained. But let's just talk about some of the practical scenarios. Leaders focus on what is the job of a leader. I think the basic answer would be to drive mission, vision, and values. It covers everything in it. But when we say values are all human soft skills related things. So involving every person in the game, respecting people, bringing in the innovation, the mindset change. So everything is based around the human aspect. One very key thing over here is that, as Trent pointed out, let the data decide in some of the areas. What some of the leaders do is that sometimes they try to take decision based on their gut feelings. So sometimes it can be right, it can be wrong. I'm not denying the fact that don't take such decisions, but it's always wise to have a good people analytics and data analytics system within your organization. Let the data come up with the answers to why the certain aspects are not working or why certain aspects are working, and integrate the strategy and align it with the value system. But I think one key thing, and I'll summarize it quickly: strategy is always backed by something which has a data related to it, something which has a hypothesis, or something which is backed by any sort of research. So that is a strategy. Otherwise, if you're just trying to list down the things 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are your goals. So if you want to prosper as a leader, make sure you have the right set of culture in mind, you have the right set of scope in mind, and that is backed by the data and the best management practices. So this is a starting point for the leaders and the organization in developing their own self and their organizations.
Wayne, I don't know if you unmuted yourself or you remain. Yes, please.
Yeah, I would. So we do a lot of culture work and change work with organizations, and we've come up with we took a model, a guy named Ron Westrom, that came up with different kinds of culture models. And so there's 6 components that in our agile ways of working, we always focus on. I'll just read them. Promoting high cooperation. Does a leader do that? Do they, are messengers trained to bring information, or are they destroyed or killed or not listened to? Are risks shared? Is bridging across departments encouraged? Does failure lead to inquiry versus discipline? And is novelty implemented? So those 6 areas we typically focus. Does a manager in their evaluations, in their personal development, are they focused on those 6 areas? Because if they are, and you're not, no one's going to be perfect at all 6, but if you have a couple that you're really good at, if you allow risk sharing, if you don't discipline people when they make honest mistakes, if you allow people to interact with other departments to share information, those are the behaviors, I think, that will lead to the culture and empower the leader to really transform the organization.
Jessica.
So what I was thinking of during when people were talking was just going back to having clarity on what your OKRs, KPIs, whatever your high level business objectives are and what they mean. And then also taking it to a next step of, we know that when leaders come to us as HR They think they're doing the right thing because they have an internal resource, they're not paying additional money to use, and this person is going to lead this training or fix this issue for me. But ultimately, many times what they're asking for is surface level, and it's not what actually needs to be addressed. So the best way as HR leaders that we can help to align the people strategy to the business objectives is to be those detectives and be those sleuths and understand what's lingering beneath the surface. So I'll use the example, I was working in a business and my third day at the office, the VP of customer success pulled me in his office and said, "Thank goodness you're here. We're having all these communication issues on my team. We need training on how to better communicate and collaborate together." And he's throwing out all these names. And I said, "Do me a favor. I've worked here for 3 days. Can you pull up an org chart? I don't know who any of these people are or what their roles are." So in his part of the customer success org, he had about 80 people. He had 4 managers in an org of 80 people. So no, a customer success manager cannot effectively manage 20 to 25 people who are on the phone, who are fresh out of college, who it's their first job, who need a lot of help. That was the issue. But if I had taken his comment at face value and just said, "Oh yeah, I can do communication training all day, not a problem," that wasn't going to fix the problem. So we went down the road of redoing his org chart, which, took months and months because you have to get approvals and lots of internal conversations. And then I looked at him and I said, "And you're right, you're going to need training, because when you have new team leads and new managers, it's going to be their first time in those roles and they're going to need training. But you don't need communication training. You need to redo your org chart." So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle of understanding what the ask really is so you can get to that core issue. And a business objective was we were trying to decrease the time to close tickets, increase customer satisfaction and net promoter score, right? All of these things. But when you don't have your org correct and functioning, those things are automatically just going to stay and probably go, lower than we wanted them to go. So I think that's a big piece of this work, is really understanding what's not being said and how in your role you can work to address those changes.
Well, we are already about 2 minutes into the second half of our time today, and I am so happy to see some of our panelists very energetically engaged in the comments. So I would invite you to bring the tips and tricks and the practical steps that you already shared in the comments in the main conversation. So for everybody watching us or listening to us now or later on the recording, what are some of the practical steps that they can do to back to Wayne's point, to really frame more meaningful conversations about this and then actually make things happen? And Trent, over to you now.
All right, so I'm a data guy. I think Khalil mentioned earlier that I like, I think it was a guy at Netscape that said, if we're going to trust anyone's gut, we're trusting mine, if not, bring data. That's kind of my viewpoint. I like to start with the data and then see if it validates the gut. So I like to look at, we've got well-being surveys, we've got NPS, we've got a couple of different assessments that we run on our team members. And, that information by itself tells one side of the story. So if you start to see a dip like in relationships or connectedness with the organization's mission, vision, and purpose, if you start to see that and then you overlay it onto finances, onto production, we get paid whenever we work on a project or we have resources that are working on a project for an institution. And if we start to see a dip in revenue and it coincides with, some of the well-being surveys or a dip in the NPS, that to me is an immediate trigger of going, okay, something's not jibbing with our culture, and it's having a direct impact on our profitability, on our revenue, on our risk mitigation, whatever that KPI is that you're overlaying that information into. And what I have found that's what gets business leaders mindsets in most organizations. I'm very blessed that our CEO is borderline obsessed with culture, to the point where I have to go, hey, we still have to run the business, so like kind of take it down a notch. I've never in my career had to say that. It's usually been the other way around. So I don't have to sell the value and the impact that culture has on our business. But I have worked at institutions that go, oh, that's just touchy-feely HR crap. being able to lay it over financial results, those KPIs that are most important to the organization, and showing the trend, showing the correlation, that's where you want to start getting the ears and the attention of your business leaders to actually say, okay, well, how do we fix this? And then you can go into some of the tactical things. So start with the data, not just exclusive to the human part, overlay it into some of the business KPIs. And then once you have the attention of your leaders, that's whenever it's time to strategize and execute.
I would like to add one thing, Trent. I think we resonate, I think, on the same frequency when it comes to data. But one thing is important. When I work with the clients, they come up with all sort of fancy terminologies and softwares, and that should we be using this software, because in inverted quotes, it's very important that organization is doing it. So first you need to understand if your leadership is ready for an advanced data analytics or KPIs or OKRs, whatever you want to call them. If they are ready for such an advanced thing, try everything out in the market. But if your people, your management team, your employees, your culture is not conducive for such a technical thing, keep it simple. Keep it as simple as, let's suppose, if you're measuring project communication, so 1 point for each time a person delivers an email on time, -2, let's suppose, if the manager himself has to call up to the person, like, what happened about the project update. So it depends upon the organizational status, where your organization as a strategy, in terms of the systems and the processes stand. The people listening to this, it's important to realize there is not just one way of doing the things right in business. So it can be as advanced as some of the tools mentioned, or it can be as simple as using a PowerPoint presentation or an Excel. So work where your organization stands, where your leadership is, and then work your way upward.
Yeah, and I mentioned this in one of the comments on LinkedIn. Someone had asked, what are some ways to measure these soft skills? And there's a ton of them out there. Strength Finders, DISC, Myers-Briggs, even though if you watch the Netflix special, you'll probably never use Myers-Briggs again. But there are certain ones that are out there that you can use that can actually quantify. And I think Jess gave an example of, the manager wants the training on this. If any of you have ever watched Billions, I think it's on Cinemax or HBO. It's about a hedge fund. Wendy Rhodes is like who I am as an HR person. And it's funny because whenever I was growing up, I was like, I want to be a psychologist. And then I was like, I don't want to get paid to listen to people's problems all day and try to fix them. And then somehow I ended up in HR, and that's exactly what I'm doing. But, whenever I sit down with teams and with leaders and, employees, I do treat it like a session. I treat it as we're doing some co-counseling here. And sometimes I think that many employees doubt the impact that the past, whether it's personal or professional, affects their present. And sometimes you have to bring that to their cognition and then use some of these other tools like DISC or Strength Finders and sit the two down. Not too long ago, I was consulting a client, and he's like, this person is insubordinate. And then I talked to the individual, and he goes, that person doesn't want me to express any kind of an opinion. And so I pulled up their assessment results, and I was like, so I pulled them both together. I said, you two don't have a personality problem issue. You have an intensity and a speed at which you process information. You two are polar opposites. That's what's causing the rub. And I think for HR people, that's where you can really bring in these soft skills to help transform the culture by bringing awareness to how some of these things just make us tick and make us respond. And so if you can increase that self-awareness, you'll start to see productivity, team relatedness, connectedness, productivity, all of that stuff will start to increase. But you really have to almost be like a psychiatrist, which would be great, because sometimes I wish I could write myself a prescription for drugs to get through the day. But, sometimes that's what our business leaders need. And to Jessica's point, they think they need something at service level. You got to go deeper.
Thank you, Trent. Any thoughts on this one still?
I guess
Well,
I'll. Oh, go ahead.
please. No,
No, I
no,
was.
go, Mike, go.
To me, it's always been about behavior. Behaviors generate attitudes. People think it's the other way around, but and change is difficult. So we approach it a little differently. We look at some of the activities people do, the rituals they do on a regular basis, like meetings and communications, and we agilize them. Instead of 2-hour staff meetings, we go to 15-minute sessions more frequently. And instead of 30-page presentations that nobody ever reads, we go to executive summaries. So we're taking people where they are and just kind of agilizing, reducing the way they do things, which in my mind and our experience has been a much better way to be changed. You can have change. And so we typically start with, how do you meet? And you're having the staff meeting. Some people show up. If you're on a project, people start to get disinterested. And so we have to figure out how we meet more effectively to align where we want to go. And so our focus has been on behaviors that managers can figure out certain activities and certain rituals they do that can really drive change.
Well, I will invite, Jessica, please.
Oh, I can hop in quickly. So I'm a big proponent in data and using data to tell the story. But I think at the core where HR overlaps of representing the interests of the business and representing the interests of the employees is understanding the points where data is telling the whole story and understanding those scenarios that data may be missing a piece of the puzzle. And how and why is that the case? So an example I'll use is during COVID, I had started at a new organization right before COVID and put together a new performance management process, which everyone in the company bought into and felt great about. And we had the metrics in line and we were doing things a little bit differently for the sales team because obviously that's a very metrics driven business unit within the organization. And when we had our first quarter review into COVID, on paper, the entire sales team should have been either put on a PIP or immediately fired because none of them were coming even close to their metrics. Well, based on COVID lockdown and based on it being a SaaS business, that wasn't a surprising outcome for that period of time. So it really went from leaders in the organization saying, how did we miss the mark and what are we going to do with these people, to having empathy and understanding what was going on in the world around us. Most of them got spot on bonuses because they were killing themselves to make the numbers that they had met. But sometimes we have to take that step back as HR leaders and say, yeah, the data is telling a story, but there's also major factors in the world that are heavily contributing that we didn't take into account when we put this new process together in January, because COVID wasn't a thing in January of 2020, but it was a really big thing in June and July of 2020. So I think that's really kind of our part to be the voice of the employee and help to meet the needs of the employee with the needs of the business in scenarios like that.
I just want to be mindful of using acronyms and making sure everybody understands them. You mentioned to be put on a PIP, which means performance improvement plan.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
so just putting acronym subtitles here. And I would also invite you to join me on a small crusade that I started a few weeks back, when in one of the comments, someone in the audience said, I'm really enjoying this conversation, but I live the reality of an HR function of one. And ever since that question, I want to bring this perspective into all the panels that I have the privilege to facilitate. What from our conversation so far you would add on or you would customize to address people in the audience who live in a reality of an HR function of one? How would you
say leverage AI as much as possible, especially now going forward? I think that's a good starting point. There's a lot of amazing things happening. There's a lot of platforms that maybe are or are not AI related also, and apps that actually kind of automate a lot of the process work behind the scenes. I'm sure you're more familiar with the titles than I am, but I think like Bamboo HR or something, Bambi, there's all kinds of them. So I would actually start there.
That's a great point. Today, we do Leadership 360s, and then we have mid-year review. And so I was working with the CEO about kind of the last step is this was for one of his directs, coming up with an action plan based on the feedback. And he says, "Hey, I think most of this is covered in the yearly review." So I threw it into a document, threw it into one of my favorite AI tools, which is Humata. It analyzes a PDF, and you can ask questions based off of that document. So I put both sections of feedback in there, and I asked AI. I said, "I need you to look at point A and point B, and you tell me what is in point A that's not in point B." And it came up with 12 different things that I copied, pasted, sent to the CEO and said, "Here are 12 behaviors or 12 things that came up during the feedback session that you did not list in the mid-year review." It took me less than 4 minutes. And most of it was correcting my grammar in the email going to the CEO. So I agree. AI is a powerful assistant whenever it's used correctly, especially for the analysis. I mean, the amount of time that I used to spend between 16 different worksheets that now I can throw them all in one and slap Data Studio or Snowflake on top of it and say, pull all these together and tell me this. I mean, God bless. It's beautiful to live in this time now.
I would like to jump in and say one thing. Reading the comments and talking to people as well, HR people always say that their voices are not being heard. The leaders do not listen to them. I think it's important to understand two things. Number one, where your business is headed and what the business is. So as a HR people, you need to understand and master what your business and the industry is. This is the first thing. And then understand where the world is moving. So as mentioned, world is moving towards AI, automation. And once again, when AI and automation comes, the next ultimate challenge would be how to, merge this AI and automation thing with the human side. So develop skills, doesn't matter what the platforms are, but unless and until HR understand these two things, what their business and industry is, and number two, where the world is headed. So if this can be learned, the HR can do anything within the organization.
So I was going to initially say, technology and AI, but already covered by the predecessors. So I guess the other lens that I would look through on this, because I've been an HR team of one, is understanding that what's on your plate and what requests are coming in, and understanding how many people in the organization is this request versus what's already on your plate going to impact. What's a ripple effect that if you don't do this task, it's going to hold up X, Y, and Z down the road, and being able to understand what requests are coming in, what's on your plate, and how you need to prioritize those things, because everyone's going to come to you and think that their priority is the biggest priority, and that's true for them, but that doesn't mean that it has to be true for you. So being able to prioritize and kind of communicate and articulate why, that's going to be a next quarter or next year thing or whatever, I think is really, really critical as far as sanity and self-preservation and being true to the needs of the organization.
And I think too that HR, especially, we get so used to just being inundated with meetings. I'd like to encourage, like, something that I wish that I would have started doing earlier in my career is blocking off time. Every Friday I have the same routine. I evaluate my week because I color code all of my appointments so I can see where I spent the time. And then I look forward into the week and I go and I grab free spaces, and it's deep work, project work, whatever it is. I go ahead and claim that time before someone else can. And I've got a kind of a hard, fast rule that my calendar is how I manage my time. It is not a to-do list that other people have access to. So once I made that switch, I got a hell of a lot more productive and a hell of a lot more focused on what really mattered versus the noise.
Yeah, I've been a one-person HR shop in a couple of organizations, and it really depends on the culture. One of the organizations has been around for 50 years. The other one had been around for about 6 months. And the 50-year company, they were doing well, doing okay, but not great. And so they brought me in to do certain things. But in fact, they didn't really want to change. So it's understanding the CEO, where or he or she wants to take the organization. And then can you add value? I'm big on providing value versus just activities. In fact, one of the things we talk about is, typically we measure output or busy activities when in fact we want to focus on value. What value do we bring to our customers? If you don't bring value, what's the point, right? And a lot of people have asked about HR is not at the table. Well, if you bring value, you'll own the table. That's really the differentiation. So for me, if I'm an individual, it's really assessing the organization, where they're going, and how can I add value. So the one where they had 50 years, I bought in a performance management system, I bought in an intranet, things like that, and that was valuable. For the startup company, it was more recruiting and some basic organization, policies and procedures and things like that. So it really depends on the culture. Yes, data is important, but when you're in a small company, sometimes you don't have much data, or it's all on payroll and you can't really get it because the payroll person doesn't want to give it to you. And so it becomes a challenge, and you wind up using spreadsheets, which is not the ideal way to go.
Well, this next question is inspired by something that was mentioned earlier on how organizations follow conversations. And Wayne, I believe you used that expression. My curiosity is, do you have any powerful, maybe even signature questions that you bring with you into the conversations that you have with the key stakeholders across the organizations?
I can go. I just have a couple that I usually start with. I mean, typically it's really like, what is your pain points? And then to Jessica's point, drill down into that pain point, because they're going to say things like training, we need our people to change, but they're not going to actually know what they need a lot of the time. They just see the symptom of it. So we need to get down to that root cause, as Jessica mentioned. And so I just really kind of keep asking the 5 whys if I need to get deeper to understand what the real issue is, and then how we measure it, and then how they're willing to drive that going forward.
I'm a big fan of asking of what's the talent strategy? Are we building or are we buying? Because that tells you everything you need to know. Are we building the team from within, and we're really focused on longevity and promotion cycles and seeing people grow? Or is it more of a burn and churn, and we can buy whatever talent we need at whatever point in time, and we need our external branding to be good, and we need our benefits to be good, so we're an attractive place to work? But we're not so worried if somebody comes and gives us 2-3 years and moves on. We're okay with that, because as a people leader, that tells you everything you need to know about how the company views their team.
I will
Similar,
typically ask.
I'd like to. Oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Wayne.
Trent. I'm sorry.
No, sir, go for it.
I would typically say, are you a sage on the stage or a guide on the side? So a sage on the stage is someone who just kind of talks all the time and tells you what to do. A guide on the side helps people figure out themselves and guides them and gives them resources. And so it's interesting the response you get from most people. They say they're guide on the side, but in fact, mostly they're sage on the stage.
It's kind of funny because one of the ones that I use is, are you a missionary or a mercenary? Because it gets really into, I am here, mercenaries, they don't necessarily believe in the war that they're fighting. They believe in the paycheck that they're going to get. Missionaries will, traverse any kind of obstacle because they believe in the holistic goal that they're trying, or the end destination they're trying to get to. The other one that I like a lot of times, and it's more to force me to listen, is unpack that. And it just remain quiet and see where they go. I have a tendency to want to kind of question my way and to get someone into a corner and go, "Hi, I've got a solution." So that's more of a way to force me to actually make sure that I'm listening. And the other one I like, just because I'm sadistic, I like to ask leaders, what is the one thing that you hope I never find out that's going on in your department that keeps you up at night? And you'd be surprised some of the responses.
Yes. So I always asked him, do you want to be the biggest company in the world, the most profitable, or the most values driven? And you have to choose one of them. So the leader's mindset quickly changes, their strategies, their mission, vision, values, just starts crumbling down. So I think the clarity, like, do you want to be the biggest organization? Do you want to be the best tech driven organization? Do you want to be the most values driven organization? Brings in the answers from the leadership, from the top management. So this is where you start off, like, what the mindset of the owners are. This is a practical tip for all the people listening as well. Sometimes the leaders don't listen, so you need to have the same sort of emotional intelligence. You need to use your words effectively, understand what the demands of the organizations are, and then using it wisely to communicate your message.
This is wonderful, and it's very frustrating to know that we have 5 more minutes to go. So, in the interest of time, this is the wrap up, punchline, mic drop round. You have about 1 minute each. And if you look back at your work, aligning people strategy to the business objectives, what is your key takeaway? And we will go counterclockwise. That means that Jessica, you will go first. Just give me a thumbs up when you're good to go. And until then, I will just ask everybody, if you love this conversation, go check the recording on hackinghrlab.io or check the LinkedIn space in a few minutes after the live is done. And Jessica.
Yeah, I guess I'll just jump in since I'm first. So I think when we're talking about the one thing that takeaway that I have looking back at the work I've done as far as aligning people and business strategy, it's really being the middle of those two concentric circles. How do you represent the needs of the business, but also feel like you're representing the needs of the people? HR has such a reputation of being the voice of the business, and you're ultimately going to do what the needs of the business is. But who's representing the needs of the people? We all know that when our people feel taken care of, they're going to take care of our businesses. So I think that's really the key overlaying of those two concentric circles, not just being seen as an advocate for both, but truly being an advocate for both.
Thank you so very much, Jessica. Tonio.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep mine short and sweet. It's literally one sentence. I just feel like it's not one or the other, the people or the business. It's both and. And in fact, the people and the way that they experience the organization and the way they're treated actually drives the business. So my focus has really just been on transforming organizations into what I would call thriving ecosystems where the businesses thrive because the people are doing the best work of their lives.
Thank you so much. Wayne.
To me, it's about the conversations we're having, the questions we're asking. How might I imagine if things that don't have an answer? That's really how I think, as I said before, all transformation is linguistic. It's a language we use. And so for those on the call, think about the language you're using in your daily lives. And does it bring value to the customer? Does it engage people? Does it motivate people? Does it excite people? Those are really what is important nowadays, because people want to be motivated, want to be engaged in this world, especially all the stuff going on. And so just look at your language, and can you inspire people? Can you motivate people by focusing more on how you say things and get them involved?
Thank you. Trent.
Well, you know that I always use a quote from one of the comics from Marvel, and looking and listening to the conversation today, I want to reminds me of a quote from Thanos from, I think it was the Avengers Infinity War. He said that the hardest choices require the strongest wills. And I think especially now, whenever I think about some of the challenges that we have as HR practitioners, I think the ones of us that are going to survive and thrive and help our companies do the same is going to be those of us that just have the strongest will.
Wonderful.
Or at least that's what I'm telling myself whenever I go to bed at night.
Thank you so much. Halil, bring us home on this one.
Panel has made my job very easy. Thank you, everyone. I think I would just like to summarize. HR, if you are in HR, if you want to make an impact, learn the business, learn what your industry is. Second thing, understand the future of work, where the world is headed. You need to upskill yourself in terms of automation, AI, the soft skills, the cultural, emotional intelligence. Learn the skills, learn the industry. Everything else would come, side by side. But as a starting point, understand what your business is and where the world is headed.
This was an amazing hour. Thank you, Jessica, Tonil, Wayne, Trent, and Halil for giving me the privilege to witness it from a front row seat. It was amazing. Many, many bits of wisdom and joy and inspiration. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us either today or later. You can find the recording of this conversation on hackinghrlab.io. And I would also encourage you to look for the Becoming a Strategic HR BP series and also the People Analytics Summit. If you enjoy this conversation, you will definitely find many useful and helpful bits there as well. Continue the conversation in the comments. Do reach out to us And I am looking forward to welcoming you all either as speakers or in the audience for many more conversations to come. Thank you, everyone. And also thank you, Jessa, for taking care of us. Thank you.